Hello, folks. Welcome to Kudlow. I'm Larry Kudlow. Coming up in the show tonight, we're going to talk about a surprise Fed announcement. Many more rate hikes are on the way, even though they decided to pause here in June, and the stock market got pummeled on the news. We're going to talk about it with Art Laffer in a little while. Also, former Vice President Mike Pence talks to me about his newly announced presidential campaign, and Senator Marsha Blackburn is going to tell us why we need a special counsel for the Biden-Burisma bribery scandal. But first up, yesterday was a sobering day for the entire country, and of course, for the former President Donald Trump. As you know, Mr. Trump pleaded not guilty to all the politicized and weaponized charges ginned up by Joe Biden and Merrick Garland Justice Department aimed at stopping him from becoming president. They know full well that if Trump were elected to a second term, he will clean out the corrupt stables in Washington, D.C. swamp. The real-world scenario of a sitting president attempting to throw his principal opponent into jail is surely one of the most dastardly actions ever taken in American history. Stuff that is typical in third-world countries or communist nations, but never before in America. Mr. Biden himself facing allegations of the ever-expanding Burisma bribery scandal, not to speak of the fact that Biden illegally removed documents when he was a senator and vice president and then spread them around Washington and Delaware and who knows where else. But Trump is a fighter. Indeed, my term, fightingness, has won him new plaudits and support in the face of these unprecedented Justice Department attacks. Mr. Trump gave an excellent speech last night at his place in Bedminster, New Jersey, showing an even-keeled temperament and raising a number of highly substantive issues. Now, take a listen, please, to one of his first points.
Judge Amy Berman Jackson's decision states, under the statutory scheme established by the Presidential Records Act, the decision to segregate personal materials from presidential records is made by the president during the president's term and in the president's sole discretion. The president enjoys unconstrained authority to make decisions regarding the disposal of documents.
That's really the key line. Unconstrained authority to make decisions regarding the disposing of these documents. Now, he talked about the outrageous charges regarding the Espionage Act. This was a big part of his speech last night. Please take a listen.
Threatening me with 400 years in prison for possessing my own presidential papers, which just about every other president has done, is one of the most outrageous and vicious legal theories ever put forward in an American court of law. The Espionage Act has been used to go after traitors and spies. It has nothing to do with a former president legally keeping his own documents. As president, the law that applies to this case is not the Espionage Act, but very simply the Presidential Records Act, which is not even mentioned in this ridiculous 44-page indictment. Under the Presidential Records Act, which is civil, not criminal, I had every right to have these documents.
All right, there you have it. Finally, Mr. Trump keeps his eye on the most important issue in the presidential campaign, which is the failure of Mr. Biden's inflationary socialist economic policies. Take a listen.
The country is in very serious trouble. When inflation is allowed to rage, when energy independence and dominance, we had independence and dominance. We were going to be soon very, very dominant. Within 6 months, we were going to dominate the whole world with energy, make a fortune. We were going to be paying off debt and lowering taxes at a level that nobody's ever seen, and they came in and they ended it. But when that's taken away from us, when interest rates and taxes spiral upward in an uncontrolled way.
All right, as I said yesterday, was a very sobering and sad day in American history. You got a sitting president attempting to weaponize the justice system by actually throwing his principal opponent in jail. Never before has something like this ever happened in American history. Ever. Not even in the most corrupt days of the 19th century. But here's the good news. With his legions of patriotic supporters, former President Donald Trump will fight this corruption to the bitter end. And my advice, folks, don't sell him short. And that's my riff tonight.